Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanaka.
Welcome. This is our deep dive, and it's really for those of you just starting out with Japanese history at university.
That's right. Today we're tackling the Muromachi Shogunate.
Yeah, we want to get into how it was set up, how it worked day to day, and really importantly, how it connected with the rest of East Asia, especially the trade aspect.
Exactly. We'll look at, how it actually got started, its structure.
And then the wider picture.
Right. Its dealings with Ming, China, Korea, Ryukyu, a time of big shifts across the whole region.
Okay, so the very beginning.
Yeah.
How did this Muromachi shogunate actually come into existence? It followed that messy time, the northern and southern courts period.
It did. And the key moment was 1392, when Ashikaga Yoshimitsu managed to bring those two courts together. Unification.
Right, ending that conflict. So he could focus on, building his own power base.
Pretty much. He started trying to get the Shugo daimyo, those powerful regional military governors, under, let's say, tighter control.
And that led to the Muromachi Bakufu being set up in Kyoto.
Yes, Kyoto became the new political center. Think of the Flower Palace the Hana no Gosho Yoshimitsu built. It wasn't just fancy, it was a symbol of authority. And a cultural hotspot, too.
Okay, so this Muromachi Bakufu, how was it actually structured? It wasn't just Yoshimitsu calling all the shots, was it?
No, definitely not. It was more complex. Really key position was the Kanrei, basically the shogun's deputy.
The deputy, okay.
And that role was always held by someone from one of three specific powerful families. Hosokawa, Shiba, or Hatakeyama, all related to the Ashikaga line.
Ah, so keeping it sort of in the extended family but spread out a bit?
Yeah.
Sounds like it could cause problems down the line, though.
It definitely could, and did. A bit of a balancing act. Then you had the military side.
Right, keeping order and all that.
That was the samurai Dokoro, the board of retainers. And the heads of that came from other big families, like the Yamana, Akamatsu, Ishiki, Kyogoku.
Different families again, so multiple power centers, almost.
Yeah. In a way, yes. And there were other bodies, too. The Mandokoro handled administration, finances, general paperwork, you could say.
Okay.
And the Hayajoshu, that was like a council discussing major policies, legal stuff.
It sounds quite organized, but I remember reading the shoguns still had trouble with some of those Shugo daimyo.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really crucial point. Some Shugo controlled huge areas, multiple provinces even. They had their own armies, their own economies.
So they weren't always keen on taking orders from Kyoto.
Not always, no. It was a constant tension throughout the period. Central power versus these strong regional lords.
So how did Yoshimitsu try to, boost his own authority against them?
Well, he used a few different tactics. He worked hard to get influence at the imperial court, even with the big temples and shrines.
Ah, playing the prestige game.
Exactly. He even became Grand Minister of State, Daijo Daijin, which was a huge deal, symbolically.
Gave him more legitimacy.
Right. But he wasn't afraid to use force either. There were rebellions he had to put down.
Like the Meitoku Rebellion.
Yes, against the Amana clan. And the Oe Rebellion against Uchiyo Shihiro, that guy controlled 6 provinces, so he was a major threat. Yoshimitsu needed to show he was in charge.
Makes sense. So Kyoto's the center, but how did they govern the regions further out, like the east?
For the east, they set up the Kamakura-fu. It governed 10 provinces in the Kanto region.
And who ran that?
It was led by the Kamakura Kubo, a position usually held by someone from another branch of the Ashikaga family, kind of hereditary.
Okay, another Ashikaga.
And they were assisted by the Kanto Kanrei, typically someone from the Usugi clan.
But wasn't the Kamakura-fu a bit independent?
Very much so. It often did its own thing, which caused friction with the main Bakufu in Kyoto. It was a persistent headache for them.
Right, and Kyushu, way down south.
They had the Kyushu Tandai for that region, less independent than Kamakura, but still a regional administrator.
Seems like managing Japan back then was complicated. Lots of moving parts.
Definitely. And all this governing, all these structures, they needed money.
Of course.
Yeah.
Where did the Bakufu get its funds?
Various places.
Right.
They had direct income from lands they controlled themselves, the kendenden.
Their own estates.
Exactly. Plus taxes on the Shugo and the Hido, the local land stewards.
Okay.
Then there were specific taxes, tamsen on land, minabetsusen, which was basically a house tax.
House tax, interesting.
Kiminesen, which were toll fees at barriers and ports. And they taxed commerce, too.
Like merchants.
Yeah, moneylenders and sacred brewers paid special taxes, the dosayaku and sakayaku.
So tapping into the urban economy, too.
Right. And a really important source, which we'll get into more, was the profit from official trade with Ming China.
Ah, okay. That brings us nicely to the bigger picture. East Asia at the time. Japan wasn't alone, and things were changing elsewhere too, right?
Big time. The 14th and 15th centuries saw huge shifts. In China, the Yuan dynasty, the Mongols were out, replaced by the Ming dynasty. A massive change.
Had big ripple effects, I imagine.
Absolutely. And over on the Korean peninsula.
New dynasty there too.
Yep.
Goryeo was replaced by Joseon, founded by Yi Seong-gai, later King Tayo. That dynasty would last for centuries.
Wow. And even further south, in the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa today.
There too. The early 15th century saw the Ryukyu kingdom unified under the Shō dynasty. Before that, it was 3 separate little kingdoms.
So consolidation happening across the board. Interesting. Now, you hear a lot about Wako around this time, Japanese pirates. Where do they fit in?
Ah, the Weko. They were a major disruptive force, mostly groups from Kyushu and the Seto Inland Sea area, local lords, merchants, sort of semi-independent actors.
And they were raiding China and Korea.
Yes, especially when official trade was difficult or restricted. Their activities caused huge problems for China and Korea.
Weren't they part of why Yi Seong-gai rose to power in Korea?
They were. He gained a lot of fame and support by successfully fighting off the Wako. So their actions had real political consequences.
Now, you mentioned Ryukyu unifying. They became quite the trading power, didn't they? How did that happen? Their location was key, but also diplomacy. In 1372, the king of Chuzan, one of the 3 kingdoms before unification, set up formal ties with Ming China.
That opened the door for trade,
A very specific kind of trade, tributary trade.
where they send tribute and China sends back gifts, often worth more.
Exactly. And Ryukyu went all in. Records show they sent 171 tribute missions to the Ming court.
271. That's a lot. More than Japan.
Way more. Japan sent only 19 in the same period. Annam, modern Vietnam, sent 89. It shows how central that relationship was for Ryukyu.
So what were they trading, these Ryukyuans?
They became this amazing intermediary hub connecting Japan, Korea, China, but also Southeast Asia, places like Siam, Malacca.
What kind of goods?
Things like spices, medicines from Southeast Asia were huge. Things China and Japan wanted. They weren't just moving goods either, but culture, ideas.
Were real crossroads. Though didn't they eventually get taken over?
They did, yeah. Their independence as a major trading power ended in 1609 when the Shimazu clan from southern Japan subjugated them. But for a couple of centuries, they were vital.
Okay, all this context is great for understanding the main event, trade-wise. The Kangō trade with Ming China. The Tally trade.
Yes, this was central to the Muromachi shogunate's foreign policy and economy. Remember, Ming China didn't really like private foreign trade.
And they kept demanding Japan deal with the Wako pirates.
Constantly. So Ashikaga Yoshimitsu saw an opportunity or maybe a necessity. He needed to clamp down on the Wako to get official trade going.
What did he do?
He ordered the Kyushu Tandai, his administrator there, to suppress the pirates. And then, in 1401, he sent an official mission to the Ming court.
And wasn't there something about the letter he sent, how he addressed the emperor?
Yes. Famously, he signed it, King of Japan, your subject, Minamoto.
Your subject, that sounds subservient. Why would he do that?
Well, it was probably calculated. It acknowledged the Ming emperor's sort of theoretical superiority in the East Asian order, which the Ming court wanted to hear.
Appeasing them.
Partly. But it also helped bolster his authority back in Japan. Being recognized as king by China was a big deal. And, crucially, it opened the door for trade profits.
So, diplomacy serving multiple aims. Smart.
Very. And this led directly to the Kangō system, the tally system.
Right, the tallies. How do they actually work?
Basically, it was an anti-piracy measure. Official Japanese ships going to China for trade were given 1/2 of a numbered wooden tally.
And the other half.
Was kept by the Ming authorities. When a ship arrived in a Chinese port, like Ningbo, the officials would bring out their half, if the 2 halves matched perfectly.
Proof it was an official ship, not Wako.
Exactly. It authenticated the mission. This whole trade was framed within that tributary system we mentioned. Japan offers tribute.
Which was really trade goods.
Yes. And Ming China gives gifts in return.
Which were also valuable trade goods or currency.
Right. It was trade, just dressed up in diplomatic language.
So what was Japan sending?
Main exports were things like copper. Sulfur. Japan had mines and high-quality Japanese swords, which were prized in China.
And what came back from China?
Valuable stuff. Copper coins, Chinese cash was used as currency in Japan, then raw silk thread, and fancy silk fabrics. Luxury goods.
Now the term, you said Kangō is more accurate than Kangku for this period.
Yeah, that's a small point, but useful. Contemporary documents usually just say Kangyu, meaning tally. The term kung fu, tally slip, seems to become more common later on. Just good to be precise.
Got it. So who controlled this lucrative trade? Was it always the central Bakufu in Kyoto?
Initially, yes, the Bakufu managed it fairly directly, but over time, control, or at least the profits and organization, shifted
To whom?
to those powerful daimyo families again, particularly the Uchi clan, based in western Japan, and the Hosokawa clan, one of the Kanare families with strong ties to merchants in Sakai, near Osaka.
Ah, so the big players wanted a piece of the action. Did that cause trouble?
Big trouble. Fierce rivalry developed between the Uchi, operating out of Hakata port in Kyushu, and the Hosokawa, linked to Sakai merchants.
Competing for the China trade.
Exactly. It got really heated, culminating in an actual fight between their missions in the Chinese port of Ningbo in 1523.
A fight. In China.
Yeah, the Ningbo incident.
Yeah.
Swords drawn, people killed. It caused a huge diplomatic incident with China.
Wow. What happened after that?
The Uchi basically came out on top for a while, effectively monopolizing the official Ming trade missions that were allowed.
Crazy that trade competition led to violence overseas. What about Korea? Was there trade there too?
Yes, definitely. Trade with Hosan Korea was also important, though maybe less centrally controlled by the Bakufu.
Who ended that?
It was largely managed by the So clan, the lords of Tsushima Island, which sits right between Japan and Korea. They acted as intermediaries.
Makes sense geographically. What was traded?
A key import from Korea was cotton cloth. Cotton wasn't widely grown in Japan yet, so Korean cotton was essential.
Ah, staple good. And Japan sent.
Similar things as to China: copper, sulfur. Also, interestingly, goods that Japan got via the Ryukyu trade from Southeast Asia, like spices.
So Tsushima merchants were trading goods that came all the way from Malacca, maybe.
Quite possibly, yeah. Shows how interconnected it all was. This Korea trade happened mainly at 3 designated ports on the Korean coast.
Busanpo, Naipu, Yombo.
Those are the ones, often called the 3 ports, or Sanpo in Japanese.
But wasn't there conflict with Korea too? Didn't Korea invade Tsushima at one point?
There was. The Oean invasion of 1419. That was Korea hitting back directly at Tsushima because of ongoing wacko problems originating there.
Did that stop the trade?
Not entirely, surprisingly. Trade continued, though perhaps uneasily, but it declined significantly after another incident, the disturbance of the 3 ports in 1510, when Japanese traders in Korea rioted.
Seems as maintaining stable trade relations wasn't always easy.
Definitely not. It required constant management and diplomacy, and sometimes it just broke down.
Okay, let's just loop back quickly to Ryukyu. You emphasized their role. So, because Ming China restricted private trade and Japan was busy trying to control its pirates.
Ryukyu found itself in a perfect spot. They weren't causing the wacko problem, and they had those official tributary ties with China.
So they could act as the middlemen.
Exactly. They became the essential link connecting Southeast Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. They profited hugely by facilitating the flow of goods everyone wanted but couldn't always trade directly.
A golden age for Ryukyu in a way.
For their maritime trade, absolutely.
Okay, this has been fascinating. We've really covered a lot. The setting up of the Muromachi Shogunate, how it tried to govern,
The challenges from powerful daimyo, the sources of income.
and then placing it all in that wider East Asian context. The rise of Ming China, Joseon Korea, Ryukyu.
And seeing how central that Kangō trade with China was, politically and economically, even with all the problems like the Ningbo incident.
It really highlights how linked everything was. Politics inside Japan, international relations, economic motives, all tangled together.
You can't really understand one without the others during this period.
So a final thought for you as you're digging into this history. Think about how that pursuit of foreign trade, getting those Chinese coins and silks, selling Japanese copper, how did it shape not just the economy, but Japan's whole approach to diplomacy? And how did it affect who held power within Japan?
Yeah, and maybe consider, do we see similar things today? How does the drive for international trade influence politics and power dynamics globally now? Something to mull over.